Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Fourth Tier Fever. The regular season might have come to a close, but this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the four teams trying to fight for their place in League One. This is the playoffs. We're going to take a look at the four teams in detail, and probably cry because I've got Jake with me, but we'll get into that in a minute because both our teams aren't in it. But before we get into this episode, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're new around here. Make sure you download the podcasts wherever you get your podcasts from. Let's get straight into it. I have no set plan. We are talking about playoffs. Unfortunately for me, being a Grimsby fan, Jake being a Salford fan, both of us had the chance to make the playoffs on the final day. And would you Adam and Eve it? None of us have made it. So it's not quite the playoff discussion I wanted us to talk about, but we've got to do it anyway. How have you? I've pretty much made my thoughts known. You can go back to the last podcast to hear what I thought of ours. But Jake, we've not spoke to you since that day in Carlisle. How did you find it?
It was stressful, but then it very quickly became not very stressful when we went 2-0 down and we lost one of our best players to injury shortly after. Another one went off at half-time, doing their hamstring. So it very quickly went a bit downhill. We got back in the game, but a little bit too late. But sums up our season a little bit. Injuries, poor defensively at times, just missing that little bit of something. But if we went up, we would have come back down anyway. So I'm not too bothered about it. On to next season.
Yeah, none of us wanted to be in it anyway, but it sounds similar to us, really. We wouldn't have been good enough for it. We'd have probably gone straight back down for it. Just not ready yet. We're still a year away. Thing is, it was going so well. I remember at the time, I saw you went 2 goals down pretty quickly. And that was at a point where Chesterfield was still drawing 0-0 at Accrington. So we was in the playoffs for the best part of 5 minutes, and I was dreaming then. But no, we didn't get them. No, we lost to Wimbledon. We wouldn't have made it in anyway because Chesterfield won. I fully expected them to win, and that's what they did. But I mean, I as a part of me that is kind of glad that we were outside it anyway, heading into the final day, compared to you lot who were in it. I just think I know that we would have been in it with a win, but there's just a part of me that thinks it's not better because we actually didn't start the day in it. It doesn't really make much of a difference, but I that's what I feel anyway.
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit more pressure when you go into it knowing that you're in the playoffs and you have to win to stay in there rather than if you win, you can get in there. So there's a little bit more pressure, but ultimately you should probably win the game anyway, just to give yourself the best chance. And we both failed to do that.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, like I said, the playoffs are overrated. We all like another season in League Two. Looking at it, very much League Two South or League Two West, considering how you look at it. Of course, this is updated from the last time. I think it was midweek last week. I sort of showed this graphic, and I was going on about how awful it is. We've now got obviously us. We've got Salford in there, and obviously Colchester were confirmed as well. So that's 3 more teams to add to the league. There's obviously 4 spots left. 3 teams that will miss out in the playoffs, and of course a team coming up from the National League. Of course, you've probably noticed in there that MK Dons, their old badges is still there after the news from today. We're recording this on the Tuesday when they released their badge in the month. I tell you what, it's sort of growing on me now, but the amount of teams using circle badges now is sort of griping me a little bit. Just being, as much as, I can go on about MK Dons to the cows come home, how much I really dislike their club. No offense, Luke. In fact, no, I'm sure you probably wouldn't take it anyway. But I'm just not a fan. I'm just not a fan at all. And I totally forgot that Cambridge changed theirs, and that is 10 times worse. I think I remember seeing a graphic the other day, and it generally took me a few seconds to realise that was actually Cambridge. I completely forgot they changed there. But we'll head on to the 4 teams in the playoffs in a minute. Just wanted to mention about Bristol Rovers, who were one of the teams in there. And we'll probably, we'll talk about the relegated teams more in detail over the next few weeks, probably after when the playoffs are done. But I've seen that they look like they're reappointing Darrell Clarke, which is big for them. This was literally news that came out like 10 minutes ago. So that is a big appointment for them. He's a man that knows the club, has had success with the club. We'll probably talk about a bit more in detail at a later date. But just from my perspective, it's a terrific appointment. Is there anything you just want to add to that before we jump into the playoffs?
Yeah, like you said, it's a good appointment. And once their previous manager departed, it was clear that he was who the fans wanted, and they've done that. So that'll give them a boost after relegation, which will be disappointing for them. But they've now got a good manager who can rebuild them properly.
Yeah, of course. I think they needed a manager probably to get the fans back on side. I think Darrell Clarke does that, especially with his past history with the club, and even more so for giving me the worst day of my life at Wembley. Cheers, Darrell. We won't talk about the 2015 National League playoff final because I just don't want to. I don't think I spoke for about 3 hours. Right, let's get on to the playoffs. This is the main thing we wanted to touch on. It probably won't be the hour-long podcast or whatever because I think there's really only so much you can say on these teams. So obviously we knew that Grimsby and Salford missed out. We're not here to talk about them. We're here to talk about the 4 teams that have made the playoffs, which are Walsall, Notts County, AFC Wimbledon, and sneaking in right at the last is Chesterfield. Now, Walsall and Notts County pretty much had their place secured going into the final day. AFC Wimbledon ensured their place on the final day. A point would have done it, but they went and got all 3. And then Chesterfield as well with their pretty good run that they've been on recently, nicking 7th spot. And I think one or two sort of whispers or a couple of people keeping an eye on them, to be the team that will probably crack into it. And they did just that. They've timed their run to perfection. We'll have a look at the teams in detail and we'll have a look at the sort of games. Let's start with Walsall, as we always seem to start with Walsall at the minute. They won the final day. They beat Crewe. They beat Crewe by a goal to 0. It was their first win in 12, 13, something like that. Minutes, probably seconds away from promotion if it wasn't for the ridiculous scenes at Valley Parade. Other than Chester, I'll probably say this now, because other than Chesterfield, I don't think any team are coming into this on any sort of form, but I think maybe that win might do them the world of good, but at the same time, I think their players might feel effect from what's happened there. It's certainly a killer, and now they've got to regroup and go again against Chesterfield, who are coming into this are the form team in this. There's always been, we've on about their fall off and how staggering it's been. These bottle jobs that that people call them. And they probably are from where they were, but, it's the playoffs for them. How do you see it? Because I think the winners maybe changed my mind a little bit, but only a little bit. I think you're probably looking at Crewe. I think they've been quite poor throughout 2025, with different circumstances there, but they've not been great either. And they've, from pretty much being in the top half, in more than the top half, like right up there, especially at the start of the year, to not being anywhere near the playoffs in the end. What do you sort of think from them and, just their season as a whole, and how would you think they'll probably approach this playoff tie?
Yeah, obviously they went to Crewe and won, but it wasn't convincing like you'd expect. They started so well the season and it's gone so downhill that they've now come into the playoffs on awful form with no momentum, playing against a Chesterfield side who are one of the best form side in the league over the last 15 games. So it'll be a tough game, but for Walsall, they need to just refresh, which is something that they've struggled to do loads of times this season. So it'd be interesting to see how they do, because we've seen that they can't deal with that pressure so many times. So it'll be interesting to see.
I think it's more, we look at it and obviously the run at the bin was not good enough. I do look at their games that they sort of had. They've played some tough teams in that time, but I'm looking at more recently, losing to Accrington, very nearly beating Newport if it weren't for that handball, but They still drew with them. They drew with Harrogate. Yeah, they've just done us a appalling run. They've not lost many games, but it's still not been good enough. I think that we do look at this fall off, and it's certainly not promotion form. It's more relegation form. And if they didn't have the ridiculous first half of the season that they did have, they might not have even made the playoffs. I think the form has been that bad. But we know how capable they can be. They've still got players that can hurt teams. And yeah, it's difficult to tell. I think there's a lot of negativity around the club at the minute, from what I've seen, and rightly so. I've always said it. Well, I say I've always said it. I've said it for the past few weeks. I think if Walsall don't win this playoff, I think they have to be looking for a new manager next season. I don't. I mean, it'll obviously go higher up, but you can't have that sort of run. You can't be where you were in the table after so many games, about halfway through the season. Yes, you've had players like Nathan Lowe scoring goals. A couple of other players playing well. Connor Barrett had a good start to the season. That's a Charlie Lake. Jamie Jellis is a good player. And it's all just sort of lost their touch. A lot of those players played a lot of minutes, yes, but I think there's a lot of clubs that are probably in the same boat. And I think the recruitment in January has probably not been good enough. It was always going to be a tough task to replace Lowe, but I don't think they've done anywhere near enough. Is it Ethan Wheatley that brought in on loan from United? He's barely played. It's just little things like that. I mean, Ellis Harrison's got a few goals, but yeah, I don't know. But I think you probably do look at it. They've scored the most goals in the league. I think it was 75. Yeah, 75. They've conceded 54. I mean, 77 points. But yeah, a lot of their wins have been coming from the first half of the season. But one thing to do note is that they've actually beaten Chesterfield in February. This was somewhat around the start of that run, probably a few weeks later on down the line from that. But there's proof that they can beat. I mean, this was at a part where Chesterfield were a bit. Yeah, they've been quite inconsistent for a while. I mean, they've been playing with injuries and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, you can see pros and cons of how they're going to hurt Chesterfield, but I really don't know about them at the minute. I think out of the four, I'd actually still probably say they're the team I least fancy.
Yeah, I completely agree, because they've won 2 in 14, 1 in 14, and I think it was that stat that was going around of they would have got the record points tally of anyone, and now they would have been relegated in 13 of the last 15 seasons, something like that, which is absolutely crazy. And like you said, as much as you can say Nathan Lowe and all that, they did replace him, and ultimately it's not been good enough, and the form is just completely tailed off. So I think Chesterfield will win it. I'm not sure what you think.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably get into that for a little bit, but certainly going into form-wise, they're certainly fancied, aren't they? But I think maybe at times I look at Doncaster last season, massively on form going into it, and they fell at the semi-finals, albeit to Crewe on penalties. I mean, of course, lottery of the penalties. Coming back to but we'll touch on Chesterfield now. You've mentioned it. They've had a terrific run these last few weeks in which they've managed to get themselves in the playoffs, picked up some crucial points along the way, some good wins. They're a team that likes to score plenty of goals as well. 73, just 2 less than Walsall. I do look at their recent games in which they have played. I mean, they swept aside Fleetwood 3-0. I think the 3-3 draw with Bradford, they were 3-1 down in that, and they scored very late on. That's ended up being the most crucial of crucial points in the end. I mean, 4-1 victory against Morecambe, a little bit already down, but you still had to play what's in front of you. There was a bit of a banana skin game against Carlisle, but they had nearly 40 shots in that. Which says a lot about Carlisle. I mean, I'm just looking back at the stats from that game. Chesterfield had 81% possession, 38 shots, 15 on target, compared to Carlisle's 4 shots, 3 on target, and 19% possession. And yet Carlisle still scored a goal, which sort of says a lot about Chesterfield from that one, for the fact that it was only 2 and that they've conceded. But never mind. Yeah, there's just some big wins in there. I think, Barrow, looking at it, Notts County, the swept aside Salford, during this good run. Their only defeat came against Tranmere. It was a 4-0 defeat, bit of a freak result. But they've done terrifically well. And I think I mentioned on the pod the other day, I've been quite critical of Chesterfield throughout the season. I think maybe at times with good reason. I can probably understand the circumstances. They've had injuries and whatnot, still trying to adjust to the league. But I've always thought they were capable of finishing in the top 7, more than capable. They have the budget, they have the players. It's a bit of an aging squad, but it's still a good squad. And you can see that they're all going to continue their momentum coming up from the National League because, they absolutely romped that league last season. It was what I expected. Maybe was it what maybe Chesterfield's fans expected? I don't know. Maybe I think there's probably certainly a few that probably did. I think there might have been a few that would have been happy with a mid-table finish, but they've managed to find a way. They've creeped in. They've creeped in over Grimsby. They've creeped in over Salford, who have faltered right at the last, and Colchester is probably worth noting. And they've managed to secure that spot, and they're coming up against Walsall, and it's like I've mentioned, Chesterfield are the forward team. Walsall, in particular, are not on it. Although they did win the last game, they're not on it. I think probably if you're Chesterfield, you certainly fancy yourself at the minute, and I'd probably agree with that.
Yeah, I don't really see a world where Walsall, especially in the first leg, go to a place where Chesterfield are flying and they've lost just 3 home games all season and they go there full of confidence and dominate the game. I just don't see that happening at all. And I think Chesterfield will make it difficult because they've made it difficult for a number of teams at home for them. So, yeah, I think Chesterfield will win it.
But a part of it'll be so League Two if Walsall do it. Like, go on and win the playoffs. Not just Chesterfield, just win the whole thing. You can't write that sort. You can. It's League Two for you. Who would have thought? It's a bit like that. Who would have thought that Crawley would have gone up? Well, gone up for one. I think the way they did it as well, demolishing MK Dons and then getting the job done over Crew. Because let's be honest, everyone. I know we go back to Doncaster, but let's be honest, everyone fancied them in the playoffs last year. I'm struggling to see a team that just had anyone else. And like I said, it's the draw the lottery, and they've come out the wrong side of penalties. But it's been a happy ending as they've gone and won the league this season. But yeah, I like the look of this Chesterfield side. They play some good stuff. They score some good goals. They've got real threats when they're on it. Will Grigg in particular has had a very good goal scoring season, as I expected him to. A couple of others, some more older heads, and Paddy Madden's in there. They've just got a real good blend. And Paul Cook, I think that's probably he's been there and done that. I think probably, and I think that's the sort of experience you want heading into a playoff. So I do look at the other managers. You see Matt Sadler, you see Stuart Maynard, you see Johnny Jackson. I think in terms of what they've done in the game, I think someone like Paul Cook is ideal. I don't want to blow smoke up Chesterfield's backside, but you know what? You sort of know where I'm getting at with that. I do fancy them more than anyone, but anything can happen in the playoffs. Let's take a look at the other teams. We'll start with AFC Wimbledon. They were the ones that ended up finishing 5th in the end. They actually overtook Notts County on the final day, with Notts losing to Doncaster, in which meant they won the league. Wimbledon won at Grimsby to secure it. So that means that they've got the luxury of having the home tie against Notts in the second game. They travelled to Meadow Lane in the first game, I think Saturday night. And I think I gave Wimbledon a fair bit of credit on the weekend because I think they probably deserved it, especially for their second half performance. One thing that you are going to get from Wimbledon is the fact that they're defensively resolute. They're not going to give much away, and I don't think they'll give much away in this playoff campaign. One thing that we have noticed about their lack of goals, I think their goal that they scored against us at the weekend was like their first goal in like 400 plus minutes or something like that. And certainly going forward, in the top 7, they're the weakest by a good 10 goals. I mean, 56 goals scored. I mean, it's not bad for a season, but when you've got the others, I mean, Walsall and Chesterfield have scored 75 and 73 respectively. Notts have scored 68. There's certainly been a problem. We've been on about Matty Stevens' goals have dried up, but if he's going to come back into it, this is the perfect time. I think there's parts to Wimbledon I like in this. There's parts I don't. Would I fancy them over the likes of Walsall? Probably. Would I fancy him over Notts? I don't know. Maybe. I think it's really hard to say. I mean, we're sort of just giving this away now. I'm sort of just going through what's in my head, basically. You've got Walsall, who, I mean, like I said, no team are really on form other than Chesterfield. I mean, Notts, Walsall, and not Chesterfield and Wimbledon have not been on the best of runs recently. But we go on about that. Runs go out the window in playoffs. It's a straight shootout, really. These sort of games, and I don't think many people really take that into contention, and probably rightly so. But I don't know. I think there's been a little bit of negativity around the fan base before the Grimsby game. You see that players have been arguing with their fans, and there's a lot of concern about Johnny Jackson and how he sets his teams up, maybe being too negative at times. I can totally understand that argument. I think probably for the first half of the game on Saturday, they were very much happy, shutting up shop and playing for a draw. That's just truthful. But there's maybe that they might. Maybe one thing that they do have is a bit of grit, and I think that could go a long way, actually.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially in the playoffs. Just to know that you can keep clean sheets and you can go through pressure and get out the other side of it and not concede is big for them, because although they don't have the best away form in the league, I think they've only won 7 games. Just to know that, okay, we're going to be under pressure, but we've been through this so many times and we've not conceded. It gives you something to build on to then go and actually win the game.
What have you made on Wimbledon and Johnny Jackson recently, by the way?
It's been very mixed, like you say, because they went on a very good run around early January to end of February, but then after that it has tailed off a lot and they haven't been convincing in many of their games, and I think it is mainly due to that run that they're even around the playoffs. So I think they need to have a different mentality going into the playoffs, otherwise they could go unstuck quite quickly.
Yeah, maybe. I think there's probably a sense that maybe they do have that grit, but at the same time, I think you've got to go for it a little bit. And I feel that there's been times in the past few months in particular that haven't done that. So, I don't know. They're a weird one. But, when you've got someone like Matty Stevens, that's got potential. I say it's got potential in terms of the season it's had. Got like Omar Bugil who can score goals. James Tilley's a player I like. I think Jake Reeves is back from his suspension. It's just characters like them and players like them that maybe have a chance to get them over the line, and that's what I think to that. I'm just not sure about Johnny Jackson. Just as a manager, you can see that I think since they've been in League Two, they've made good progress over the past few years. I mean, they were miserable. Was it the first year they came down? Was it finished like 21st, 22nd in the end? They were miserable. They were just terrible. And then the year after, they were, just outside the playoffs, like 9th, 10th, something like that. This year, they've managed to go that one step further and make the playoffs. There's maybe a sense of disappointment for the fact that it took the final day to secure that playoff spot, because they have been in and around the top end of the table for quite a lot of the season. And the fact that they very nearly missed out, I think probably says a fair bit. But yeah, like I said, they're certainly going to make themselves tough to beat. I know I feel like I'm just repeating the same things, but again, I'm just sort of just going through one map. They're going to be tough to beat. And there might be a case in which they're probably trying to hang in there and look for an opening, in which, to be fair, against a team like Notts County, is very capable. Now, Notts are in this playoff. They know what they've had a fair few playoff runs over the years, mainly in the National League when they're in there. So they know what it's all about. I think they'd have been disappointed to miss out last year. Missed out they were quite away last year with their fall off in the second half of the season when Stuart Maynard came in, but he's got them in there. There was a small chance for them to get automatics on the final day. It wouldn't have happened anyway because of Bradford winning. And yeah, I think again recently they've been far from convincing. You've probably heard me over the last few weeks that I worried about both Notts County's and Wimbledon's playoff spot. That was more in hope for the fact that someone like Grimsby made it more than anything. But I think there was real concern, and I'm not sure. I still think there's a part of Notts' fan base that have not taken to Stuart Maynard. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they approach the playoffs. Of course, they're a side that have got a load of threats as well. Alessandro Jatta's had a very good season in front of goal. David McGoldrick, I think he's probably the key reason why they're there. I've said that the other week. I'm not sure if I've got any stick for that, but I genuinely believe that. I think some of the goals he's scored and just how good he is, and for what was he 37, something like that, 38. He's still class. He's still absolutely class, and that's the sort of character that you want. I know Jody Jones has been hit and miss with an injury this season, but if he is about, then we know how unstoppable he is. George Abbott's had an excellent season for them. They're a side that's got quality. I think they're maybe preferred to have the game at Meadow Lane second, but look, everyone wants a home game in the second game. I think, or maybe one if I don't know. It's just these sort of mind games, but with a ground like Meadow Lane, when you're playing for something, I don't think you really can get much better. Squad-wise, they're very capable. They're certainly shored themselves up defensively. I think it was always going to be a big ask to beat Doncaster on the final day. But yeah, I mean, we go on about form goes out the window. Just the one win in 6 for them, so then they've not been exactly flying either coming into this. So it sort of makes for an interesting matchup between them and Wimbledon, I feel.
Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting matchup because both sides haven't been convincing. Both sides aren't necessarily convinced on their manager. They've got split fan bases, so it will be a big pressure for both of the managers, and I'm sure they will feel that because they know that if they can get the side to Wembley, that there will be a lot of fans that go, actually, maybe he is the right person. So I'm sure inside themselves they'll be feeling the pressure, but they've got to just try and navigate their way through the playoffs, which isn't easy. So it will be tough because Wimbledon's away form is poor, Notts' home form is good, but not what they would have wanted. Like you said, Meadow Lane's a tough place to go, and it hasn't necessarily been that in recent weeks. So it'd be interesting to see who goes through.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm just trying to go back to the previous meetings. I remember that Wimbledon did beat Notts at Plough Lane. I can't quite remember what it was at Meadow Lane. I'm just trying to find it, but I'll tell you what, imagine a Notts County Chesterfield final. How cool will that be? It's like going back a couple of years ago in the National League playoff final, if you remember. He went to penalties and that save from, is it Archie Mayer, is it? The lad there. Yeah, it was a really, really good game of football, that, but I don't think Chesterfield in particular will probably want that. There'll be flashbacks of that. But yeah, I think I'm sort of struggling to so where else we can sort of say really. So there's the playoffs there. I think you probably know the answer, but who's got the more pressure on them? I think for me it's 100% Walsall.
Yeah, it has to be. From the position they were in to even be in the playoffs is disappointing. To think that they got promoted, because I know that their game finished just before Bradford have scored, so there still would have been that little bit of hope that they've got over the line, and then to not be over the line and know that you've got to go through the playoffs will be tough mentally. So be interesting to see because there is a lot of pressure on them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of pressure on those players. There's a lot of pressure on Matt Sadler. And this dissection, if they don't go up, pulling the parts together and what has gone wrong this season will be certainly something if that happens. It'll be certainly something even if they do go up. Because I mean, let's be honest, if they go up, I'll probably stick with Sadler. But we're on about managers already, and he's just I think you could really see, that none of the fans have really taken to him. He's come out with some really bizarre stuff in the interviews, and that's just not what you want. But look, I feel like I'm just talking complete rubbish. It's probably just, it's what it always is. I'd have liked for us to have been in there. I'd have liked, for Salford to be there because, we'd probably make the full hour. But like I said, we've got 4. If you watch this on YouTube, you see the graphic. There's 4 spots left. Obviously, 3 of them will involve this current League 2 sides. There's one more side to come up from the National League. I'm just trying to think at the top of my head who is in the playoffs because I know that their season finished yesterday. You've got York in Halifax, Oldham. They're fighting out. Rochdale are up there, I think. Southend are in it. Forest. Yeah, anyone but Forest Green. To be quite honest, I'd quite like York. But they'll probably spend a fair bit. Oldham is a club I quite like. And I'd quite like them to come up. Rochdale, I wouldn't mind. Look, anyone but Forest Green. I'd probably say that. I'd even take Southend. I mean, I've got a lot of respect for Southend. It'll just be more travelling, which will get me a nosebleed the deeper down south I go. But it's certainly looking like, I don't know, what do you make of the possible, or what do you make of what League Two could look like? I know we've mentioned this very briefly last week, but you look at it now with more teams coming into the fray. You see the retaining list that more clubs have been bringing out. I know that Tranmere have done theirs, and there's one or two others. I think Gillingham have been quite busy with handing out new contracts to players. How do you sort of see it? I know we've probably just gone off topic for the playoffs a little bit, but where would you go for like early front runners? How do you fancy Salford's chances going into next year? Early thoughts. I get it's early, but
yeah, it depends who we keep because there will have been a lot of players that would have hoped that I'll get promoted and I'll stay. People like Osama Ashley and Kelly and Mai who would have hoped that get promoted and stay a bit longer, but now you don't. They'll probably be thinking I can definitely get a League One Championship move. So for them, it is about replacing them, and which is something that we have to do, and we did do last summer quite well to even put ourselves in this position when not many fancied us. And I think that we'll be quietly confident going into it. Looking at that, I think there will be a lot of teams that think if we can have a good summer, then they should be up there. So be interesting to see like over summer because a lot of teams will be thinking if they have a good summer, they can compete because it doesn't look like bar MK and maybe Bristol Rovers, there's no obvious top 7 teams that you'd expect. So I think there will be a lot of teams that will be desperate for summer to go well.
Yeah, I'd probably agree. I think I look at it early on. I like to think, I quite like MK to fail again, but I think there's a big chunk of me that thinks they won't be as bad as they were again. I think they finished the season quite strong with the amount, with 4 straight clean sheets under Paul Warne. I think he knows when, he's a promotion specialist in League One, never mind League Two. He'll have some money to spend. I do look at it. I think Colchester will be strong again. It looks like they've got an American takeover happening from their club statement today. Robbie Cowling, I think their owner is selling up. I expected Bristol Rovers to be strong anyway. I think, as I said, the upcoming appointment. I say upcoming. I think, judging by the buzzing on my phone, I think he's actually been confirmed. Yeah, I think that's a game changer. I really do believe that. Again, as we've mentioned early on, I think he's the man to get Bristol Rovers fans on side. Speaking to a couple, I think that was mainly what they needed after relegation. I don't think they really connected with someone, but that he's one of the men that I think they will warm to. I can see Barnet doing all right. I think they've been quite strong in the National League, and I think that their squad is more than ready for League Two. Probably not right at the top end, but they'll be fine mid-table. Might make a playoff push, but they'll certainly fancy their chances. Like I said about Gillingham, I feel like there's been times in which I think they flattered to deceive quite a lot, but with the Gareth Ainsworth, maybe things might be different. They'll probably spend heavy. Fleetwood, Pete Wild, pretty self-explanatory. That one, I probably would say us. I probably would say Grimsby. Again, it sounds similar to Salford. If we can keep our best players and build on what we've already got, I think we have a good chance of certainly cracking the top 7. But certainly looking at that, I'd like to think we could probably try and push Autos. And I know it might sound silly, but I genuinely believe that. But obviously, it depends what we do in the summer. I do look at Tranmere as well. There's still that takeover still to be done. But I think if that happens, I think there's certainly one to keep an eye on. That'll be fun. I do look at. I mean, the teams that have come down. I've never mentioned Bristol Rovers and how I can see them doing quite well. What do you make of the others? I think Crawley will probably do all right. With Scott Lindsay, I think they've got a chance, but I'm really torn on Shrewsbury and Cambridge. Shrewsbury in particular at the minute. I know that Michael Appleton is there for next season, but I feel like they need a takeover. And I feel like they're going to get stuck in this rut in which League Two could swallow them. It feels like quite a few teams that have come down from League One, someone gets stuck there. I mean, you probably do see the teams that have been relegated in Carlisle and Forest Green over the years. They've mainly spent silly money and made some silly decisions, whereas Shrewsbury don't really have that. But I think it just seems a bit stale over there. Is the impression I get. What do you sort of think of the sides that have come down?
Yeah, like you said, the word stale is definitely accurate for both of the sides. They've got strong managers. Neil Harris and Michael Appleton are very good managers for this level, and obviously Scott Lindsay as well. So they are sides that need big rebuilds and won't have, like you said, the money that Carlisle and Forest Green did. So I can see them being sensible with what they do, but I don't think there'll be anything ambitious or anything exciting next season.
I wonder if Scott Lindsay will just bring all his MK Dons players from there. Yeah, you ready for round 3 basically with him after taking them at Crawley, then going to MK, then bring them back to Crawley. Won't be surprised to see Danilo Walsall or someone like a Kelly rock up back there. They're ones to look at. But I do look at some of the. I'm yet to be persuaded by Crewe. I need to see a good summer from Crewe. I know I said this the other day. I've got a lot of question marks about them. A lot of question marks about Accrington. A lot of question marks about Newport. I think those two will struggle again, especially Newport, if they don't do things correctly. I did say the other day, I think their next managerial appointment's massive. Who else haven't we touched on? Cheltenham, again, I need to be persuaded. I don't think I've seen much them at the minute. It's still early, granted. You know, the season finished 3 days ago. So it's always quite hard to judge. Salford, I do need to see a little bit more. I need to see what the summer brings, really, before I do put you in that bracket, honestly speaking. Swindon, you've obviously got Ian Holloway. You know, he's done terrifically well since he's come in. Obviously, he's got to work on the Moffuni still, so it could be quite a busy time at Swindon over the summer. Bromley, I think Bromley will be strong again. Barrow, I think, will be strong. I really like Andy Wing. Yeah, we didn't mention. You mentioned Cambridge and Neil Harris. It was one that I completely forgot, and I think Harrogate are just sort of there. Really, I just feel like Harrogate are there. No disrespect to Harrogate, but I mean, look, I've always quite praised them on the eye. They do at times. They do play some good football. Just quickly before we go, we won't make this the hour, but we'll see one more spot yet to be decided. York absolutely romped the National League without actually finishing first. It was because it was Barnet. But they've been quite far and away compared to the likes of Forest Green, Oldham, and all that sort of stuff. Who would you fancy for that? And who would you see sort of would do the best when they come? Like I said, I think York would do very well just for the fact that I think they've got a wallet load of cash, and their owner's not afraid to spend it. If you see Matt Ugler on Twitter, you know he's quite the character, but you can certainly see he's got the best intentions of the club at heart. But for a local away day, I quite like it. You know, we haven't got many of them. Harrogate's our closest, and it just seems a bit boring. But I don't know. What do you sort of think? Because obviously the National League playoffs take place over the next few days and weeks.
I think York will probably do it, but I would like Southend to do it because they've been through a lot with bad owners and just the whole mood being low. So I think them coming up would be nice because they do probably deserve it. Obviously, Oldham are very similar to Southend in the ownership situation, but I think Southend, the way they've been this season in the National League, not many really fancied them, but so I think it would be nice to see them come back.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I tell you what, I really like Roots Hall. I went there once. It was in the year when both of us were in the National League. So 21-22. I remember the first game, it should have been a Friday night. And it was on a night in which I can't remember what storm it was, but it was I think Southend took the mickey a little bit that night, if I'm going to be honest, with how late they called it off. When I can remember because I was in my lecture at uni in the morning. Toss and turns like, right, okay, do I go? Do I not? Do I risk it? Do I not? And eventually I didn't. Sort of hoping it got called off, and it did. So I mean, I was able to refund my train ticket, but went there on a Tuesday night and I saw it was lose 1-0. So yeah, it's just a proper old school ground. Yeah, I mean, I like Oldham to come up there again. They're a club that have got their house in order. Mickey Mellon, someone that knows League Two quite well. I wonder if Mickey Mellon saw the Tranmere Rovers retained and release list today, and he fancies having a look at some of those players. I think there's probably been a few times in which he's dipped at Tranmere Rovers. Of course, they've beaten him in the FA Cup earlier in the season as well. Rochdale, I quite like them to come back up. I think very good memories of my only trip to Rochdale. Luke Waterfall with a 1-0 win with a goal in the 97th minute when I dislocated my toe a day before. The only time I didn't want us to score a last minute winner did happen because that meant I was in agony. That was an awful like you look at it, the train station to the ground is like a good 2 mile away, and I stupidly walked it. Like, what am I doing? And no wonder my toe was dead black on Monday when I actually decided to go to A&E. I don't know why I left it that late. But I just have memories that Forest Green. I don't want Forest Green. I don't think anyone wants Forest Green. I mean, Steve Cotterill, he's a man that knows what he's doing. They've also got a very good squad, and they're not afraid to spend. But yeah, I really don't like Forest Green as an away day. That's just judging from a fan's point of view. And Halifax, will they even get to play a game on there? Because I feel like the amount of games that get called off during the winter, I know they've got like rugby or a couple of other things taking place on that pitch, but I mean, look, it'd be another good local away day, Yorkshire based, but I don't know. I don't think they'll come up in particular, but I think York have to be the favourite. And anything you want to add just on like any of those sort of teams? I know you probably mentioned a little bit already.
Yeah, I'd like a Northwest side to come up like an Oldham or a Rochdale, but I do think that it is probably going to be York because they've got the money, they've got the momentum, and they are probably the best side in those playoffs.
They are, and they're quite a bit good as well. It's not just they're slightly good. They're clearly, by looking at the league table, they're significantly better in terms of points, goals, games won, all that sort of stuff. And that's pretty much it. I don't think there's really much more to really say. I'm not sure if we've probably just waffled through the playoff teams. We've waffled through the teams that are in League Two and the upcoming teams that could be in League Two. We'll probably look at the playoff games in more detail when they take place. I don't really know what the plans are. Like I said, I came into this pod without really any sort of plan. You know, people can't expect me to prep anymore. I think I just sort of just do things on the fly and sort of hope it goes well. And I sort of think it has to a sort of extent, although I do think maybe people at times might think I'm a broken record, but I don't care. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Looking forward to the playoffs. Always look forward to them. They're always entertaining affairs. Hopefully, they're a little bit like last. Well, I say a little bit like last year. I'd be quite angry if it was like a drubbing in there because I mean MK Dons really wasted a spot last year. Just another chance to get a dig at MK in there somewhere. So Luke, if you're watching, you probably are. There's your little dig. I hope you enjoyed the message I put to you as well the other day when you said that you were disappointed in both of us. So that means I can go back to bullying you lot again. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you guys for listening. It's of course not quite the hour, but there's not really much more to really say, to be honest. good luck to the teams in the playoffs. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're new around here. Like I said, we'll probably look through the games as they happen. I've got a couple more pods to come, as I said the other day. I know we've got our predictions from the start of the season to look back on, and I think Luke has organised like some sort of quiz in which we'll certainly look to do after the playoffs are done. I think it's probably a good time to do that. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. As always, thank you so much for the support. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care for now.